Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a war-hardened rancher receives a bizarre letter demanding he demolish his decades-old home or pay $100K to a snobby HOA he's never heard of, he uncovers a web of lies, fraud, and sabotage that ignites a fierce land war in the Colorado hills. And he's not backing down. It started with a letter. One of those overly formal envelopes that already smell of trouble before you even open them. It was postmarked from Stonebrush Vista Homeowners Association, which struck me as odd since I wasn't part of any homeowners association. I live outside of town on my ranch called North Cross Edge, about 270 acres of rolling Colorado hillside, pine forest, and old fences that have stood longer than most of the people who now call themselves developers. I almost threw the letter out, thinking it was a misdelivery or some junk mail about property insurance. But curiosity, or maybe instinct, made me tear it open. Inside was a masterpiece of bureaucratic arrogance. "Dear Mr. Mallory," it began, "our most recent property boundary review indicates that your residential dwelling and several auxiliary structures are located within the territorial jurisdiction of the Stonebrush Vista community. To resolve this amicably, we request you voluntarily remove all unapproved constructions or remit a fine of $100,000 to the association." I had to read it twice before laughing out loud. They were essentially demanding that I tear down my own house or pay them a six-figure sum for living where I've lived since before their community even existed. I walked out onto the porch, letter in hand, looking across the pastures toward the new construction site that had sprung up like a rash over the last half year. 14 identical luxury homes lined the hill beyond my southern fence. Stonebrush Vista, the sign read in sleek silver letters, promising exclusive mountain serenity. In reality, it was a glorified subdivision, identical boxes with infinity pools and HOA fees that probably cost more than most people's mortgages. A wide paved road ran right along the edge of my property, built over an old service easement that predates even my father. The road was legal, the servitude registered decades ago, but the arrogance in that letter was something else. I reread it slowly, scanning for any shred of logic. Voluntary demolition of illegal structures. Transfer of property rights. Non-compliance may result in legal action. They really meant it. Somewhere behind those walls of freshly painted homes, someone named Karen was likely sipping Chardonnay and congratulating herself on reclaiming community boundaries. My house, built in 1986, was now illegal according to a neighborhood that didn't exist until the previous year. I took the folder from my office safe, a thick binder of property deeds, county maps, and survey records dating back to when my father bought the land from the Anderson family in the 70s. Every map, every coordinate confirmed the same thing. The house, barns, and sheds stood well within my boundaries. To be safe, I cross-checked with the county assessor's database. Same result. My property line hadn't budged an inch in 40 years. Still, the tone of that letter wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a threat wrapped in legalese. I decided to treat it accordingly. The next morning, I called the number listed at the bottom, Stonebrush Vista HOA, Office of the President. The voice that answered was as sharp and brittle as a frozen twig. "This is Karen Lutz speaking." "Mrs. Lutz," I said evenly, "I think there's been a mistake. I received a letter claiming my house sits on your property. I believe you've got your lines crossed." There was a pause long enough to hear her exhale through her nose. "Mr. Mallory, we've reviewed the boundaries thoroughly. Our survey confirms your primary residence and several outbuildings encroach on Stonebrush Vista territory. It's an unfortunate oversight from before our community's establishment." "My house was built in 1986, I said. "Your subdivision started last year." She chuckled, a dry, patronizing sound. "Land boundaries evolve, Mr. Mallory. I suggest cooperation rather than confrontation. The association is willing to resolve this privately." "Privately meaning what? Write you a check?" "Something like that," she said sweetly. "Otherwise, legal proceedings will begin. We're trying to be neighborly." I almost admired the nerve. Almost. "I'll be in touch," I said, and hung up before she could spew another word. That evening, I drove the southern fence line where their property began. The sun was setting, throwing long shadows from their shiny new gates across my dirt road. The HOA's construction had eaten deep into what used to be open scrubland. Their fence posts looked suspiciously misplaced, closer to my tree line than they should have been. I took photos measuring the distance with the GPS on my truck. The numbers didn't lie. The fence stood several feet past the survey markers. By the next morning, I'd already called a licensed land surveyor I'd worked with during my military engineering days. Full perimeter, high-precision mapping, I told him. Bring the drones, bring the LiDAR equipment, and make sure every inch is logged. He didn't ask why. In this state, when someone says the HOA is coming after me, no further explanation is needed. While waiting for him to arrive, I kept the letter pinned to my fridge as a reminder, not of intimidation, but of stupidity. A group of self-appointed suburban aristocrats had just accused a former Army engineer of not knowing where his own land ended. That was going to be their first mistake. The surveyor arrived 3 days later, just after sunrise. His name was Roland Weathers, mid-50s, former Navy tech turned private land mapping expert with a fondness for drone gear and topographical sarcasm. I met him at the south fence line, coffee in hand, as he and his assistant unloaded gear from the back of a battered van that looked like it had seen a few war zones itself. Within the hour, Roland had drones in the air, LiDAR sensors spinning, and a half-dozen satellite overlays syncing with his laptop. He didn't waste time with pleasantries, just nodded at the HOA fence and muttered, "That thing's already begging to be embarrassed." We worked the perimeter slowly. Every boundary marker, every coordinate cross-checked with the original plat map from the county. My house was clean, well inside the border, the barn too. Even the guest cabin I'd built 5 years ago on the western ridge stood a full 20 feet from the property edge. But when we reached the southeast quadrant, things got interesting fast. Roland stopped in front of the HOA's clubhouse, which was styled to look like a faux mountain lodge complete with fake stone facade and decorative elk antlers. He tapped his tablet and frowned. "Well, here's your smoking gun." He angled the screen toward me. A colored overlay showed the structure, pool, deck, mechanical rooms, sitting a full 40 feet inside my property line. Next to it, 2 homes, units 12 and 13, also intruded by at least 20 feet each, their driveways cutting directly across what had once been my fire break zone. And if that wasn't enough, a bright red line traced a gas pipeline that now sliced diagonally through my southern forest, passing under a section of old-growth pines I'd planted with my father 30 years ago. 1.2 acres, Roland said. Maybe a hair more. You've got yourself a textbook case of boundary trespass. I stood there, staring at the HOA fence, barely able to process the audacity. These people hadn't just made a clerical error. They'd physically built on my land, poured concrete, laid pipe, planted shrubs. They hadn't miscalculated, they'd invaded, and now they were demanding I pay them for it. Back at the house, Roland helped compile the full report. Certified maps, timestamps, photos, GPS data, drone footage. He even added 3D models of the encroaching structures for the court filing. Before he left, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "They're going to hate this. But the judge, he's going to love it." I didn't wait. That afternoon, I emailed the Stonebrush Vista HOA with a formal cease and desist notice. It included Roland's findings, a clear demand, demolish all structures encroaching on my property within 30 days or face a civil lawsuit. I CC'd my lawyer, the county zoning office, and the local news. I figured if we were going to fight, we might as well do it with the lights on. The next day, I got a reply, unsigned, generic, clearly written by some HOA legal rep. It rejected all claims and insisted their own survey placed all current infrastructure within legally obtained development limits. No data, no attachments, just defiance and fluff. So I filed the suit. Officially, trespass, unlawful encroachment, destruction of protected land, illegal utility installation without easement, and just for good measure, negligence. My lawyer, Dana Worth, practically grinned when she saw the materials. "They came after your house," she said, "but you're going after their subdivision. I like it." By the end of the week, I'd heard from a reporter at the local station. She'd seen the public filing and wanted an interview. I told her she could have the story, on one condition. We'd film it from my drone showing the property lines, the intrusion, and the smug concrete smugness of the HOA's new community center sitting smack in the middle of my trees. She agreed. The segment aired Sunday night. Veteran ranch owner faces off with HOA over land dispute. It showed overlays, documents, a shot of me holding the original 1985 deed, and a glorious wide-angle sweep of their clubhouse bathing in golden sunset over my stolen soil. It blew up online. Dozens of comments, people sharing horror stories about their own HOAs. A local surveyor chimed in with, "That's a textbook overbuild. Guys got them cold." I figured that would be enough to scare them into backing off. Maybe even start talks. Instead, I got a knock on my door 2 days later. A man in a beige blazer stood on my porch with a camera crew behind him and a microphone clipped to his collar. "Mr. Mallory?" he asked. "My name's Travis Dean. I represent the Stonebrush Vista Homeowners Association. We'd like to schedule a meeting to resolve this misunderstanding." I stared at him for a moment. "You brought a film crew to negotiate a property dispute. Transparency is important," he said with a fake smile. "We believe in community dialogue. Your force structures deep into my forest, Travis. Dialogue ended when you poured your foundation on my land." His grin faltered. "We maintain that the HOA acted in good faith based on maps certified in 2001. "Those maps are outdated," I said. "I've got the originals, the new survey, and drone footage. You built on the wrong side of the line. I'm giving you 27 more days before I file for forced demolition." Travis's jaw tightened. The crew kept filming. I stepped forward slowly and looked directly into the lens. "Let me be clear, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is theft. And I'm not the one who's going to be tearing anything down." I shut the door in their faces. From the kitchen window, I watched them awkwardly pack up the camera gear and walk back to their SUV. I could almost hear Karen screaming over the phone from wherever she was. 3 days after I filed the lawsuit, the gloves came off. A courier delivered a thick envelope stamped with the Stonebrush Vista HOA's legal insignia. Inside, a counterclaim. Their attorney was demanding that my house, built nearly 4 decades ago, be declared an unauthorized structure outside my legal boundary. They wanted a court order to force its partial demolition, but they didn't stop there. The claim demanded that I surrender 6 acres of land to the HOA as reparations for what they called community disruption and servitude obstruction. And just to put the cherry on the sundae of absurdity, they also wanted damages for emotional harm to residents. Emotional harm, because I had the audacity to live in my own home. At first, I sat at my kitchen table just staring at the document. The arrogance was so thick, it practically bled through the pages. They were calling me a trespasser on my own ranch. According to them, the boundaries had been redefined during a supposed land reclassification in 2001. They enclosed blurry photocopies of a map I had never seen before, marked up in red ink like a toddler had gone to town with a highlighter. No certified seals, no GPS coordinates, no official stamps. Just a big arrow pointing to my home with a note scribbled, "Encroachment begins here." I called Donna immediately. She laughed once, dry and low. "They're using the old reclassification maps. Those were never finalized. And even if they were, they don't override your deed, your county plat, or the federal GIS database." Then her tone shifted. "But Evan, this means they're going all in. They're going to try to drown you in paper cuts and PR noise. Hope you've got more fuel in the tank." "Always do," I said. She countered the next day by filing a motion for discovery. We demanded every document, every map, every piece of correspondence related to their development permits, including foundation plans, zoning variances, and utility easements. I also filed a separate request for a temporary injunction to freeze any further development or utility work until the case was resolved. Karen responded by going full peacock. She hosted a press conference right at the gates of Stonebrush Vista, with a podium and a microphone and a big HOA banner behind her, like she was announcing a run for Senate. She stood there in a pastel blazer, smiling like she was about to bless the masses with gospel truth. We at the Stonebrush Vista Homeowners Association are dismayed by Mr. Mallory's hostile and misleading actions, she said, voice syrupy sweet. Our development has brought jobs, homes, and value to the community. The allegations made against us are not only unfounded, but harmful to neighborhood harmony. We have verified boundary data, certified by professional consultants, which clearly show that Mr. Mallory's structures lie within Stonebrush jurisdiction. We are simply asking him to respect the rule of law. It was straight out of the gaslighting playbook. She made it sound like they were the victims of some roaming outlaw with a barn. I didn't reply to the press. I let my data do the talking. That evening, I uploaded a comparative video map online, split-screen footage showing my 3D survey on one side, and archival drone footage of the HOA construction site from 6 months earlier on the other. You could watch, frame by frame, as they built their fence 3 feet past the original marker. You could see the bulldozers clearing trees inside my tree line. I zoomed in on time-stamped footage where a foreman measured distance with a laser and then nodded, directing the crew to shift the fence line slightly east. Subtle but clear, premeditated. The clip went viral in the local community groups. Comments flooded in. One guy claimed he worked for the concrete company and was told not to ask questions when pouring the foundation for the community pool. Another said Karen had joked at a planning meeting about swallowing up the dead zone to make the property flow better. That dead zone was my land. The tipping point came when one of the HOA's own contractors messaged me privately. His name was Luis Rojas. He'd worked the grading phase for the first 4 houses, said he was willing to talk, on the record. 2 days later, we sat down in my workshop and filmed a deposition. Luis recounted how they'd been ordered to ignore the original stakes because the new survey shows we're clear. He said the stakes were mysteriously missing by the second week. And when he asked the supervisor, the guy shrugged and said, "We're the HOA now, we decide the lines." I gave that footage straight to Dana and made sure copies went to 2 reporters, a YouTube channel that covered HOA overreach stories, and a local land rights watchdog group. We weren't just in a lawsuit anymore. We were in a war of narratives. Karen responded by trying to discredit my survey. She claimed that Roland Weathers, the surveyor, wasn't properly licensed. Bad move. Roland not only held one of the longest-standing state certifications in Colorado, but he'd taught land surveying at a university and had been contracted by federal agencies for wildfire boundary mapping. Dana filed a motion demanding a retraction and formal apology for defamation. Roland was furious and volunteered to appear in court, maps in hand. By now, Dana had built a 300-page case file with hard evidence, testimonies, timestamps, technical overlays, and notarized documents. The judge scheduled the preliminary hearing, and that's when we learned something really curious. The HOA still hadn't submitted their boundary survey to the county, the one they kept citing, the one they built their entire counterclaim on. That was the first real crack in their wall, and I knew, deep down, that somewhere behind all the HOA paperwork, something much uglier was hiding. The first red flag came folded inside an unremarkable manila envelope. Dana brought it over personally, her jaw locked tighter than I'd ever seen. She dropped the folder onto my kitchen table without a word and flipped it open to a scanned copy of a boundary survey. "This," she said, "is the so-called document Karen and her HOA have been referencing in every filing." I finally got my hands on the original. I leaned over the printout. Right away, I noticed 2 things. First, the boundary lines they claimed, those that supposedly sliced through my barn and touched my house, had no registered GIS tags, no coordinate sets, no official stamp from the county, or even a private certifying body. Second, the document was allegedly notarized in June of 2001 by a person named Thomas M. Fielding. That name sparked something in my memory. I grabbed my own property file, flipped through the records, and found a familiar name in a very different context. Thomas Fielding, a notary I remembered from when my dad handled some land transfers in the early 90s. But that man, according to public records, died in 2015. "Yeah," Dana said, already reading my thoughts. "They forged the stamp, or copied it from an old document and slapped it on this one." We dug deeper. The supposed surveyor listed on the file, Craig Simmons, wasn't registered anywhere in the state's licensing board. No license number, no previous filings, nothing. Dana checked the watermark metadata of the scanned file and found that it had been created just 4 months ago, not 24 years ago. And to top it off, the document's properties listed KL Associates as the author. "KL," I muttered. "Karen Lutz." Dana nodded grimly. "We just crossed into felony territory." We filed a motion the next morning, submitting the fraudulent document to the judge along with affidavits from both the state licensing board and the county recorder's office. Within 48 hours, the court issued a temporary restraining order blocking the HOA's countersuit and freezing all ongoing construction activity along the disputed boundary. The judge's order specifically cited evidence of potentially criminal misrepresentation of legal documents. That same day, the County Zoning Commission issued a request to audit all HOA submitted permits associated with the Stonebrush Vista development. Word spread fast. Karen stopped smiling in public. Her pastel blazers turned darker, her interviews dried up, and the once busy HOA social pages suddenly went silent. A few Stonebrush residents even reached out to me anonymously, saying they'd had no idea what was going on and asking if their homes were safe. That might have been the end of it, if not for a young guy named Adrian, who worked in the county's GIS office. He left me a voicemail one evening saying he needed to talk off the record. We met at a diner 2 towns over. Nervous, wearing a hoodie pulled up tight, he slid into the booth and passed me a flash drive. "It's a screen capture," he said. "Karen came into our office last month, said there was a mapping discrepancy she needed help correcting. She brought donuts. Then she waited until my supervisor stepped out and asked me if I could tweak a few boundary lines. Nothing big, she said. Just match the HOA's copy to what's in the public system. I asked if she offered him anything. He nodded. Said she could get me a nice side gig doing GIS consulting for a private developer, double my current rate." "Did you do it?" "No. But I played along, recorded the whole thing on my phone. I figured if she was willing to do this with me, she's probably done worse." He wasn't wrong. Dana reviewed the recording, and we sent a copy straight to the district attorney. Suddenly, the case was no longer a civil matter. Karen's name hit the county's criminal investigations docket under suspicion of offering bribes to a public official, document fraud, and unlawful manipulation of government records. Meanwhile, the Stonebrush Vista HOA panicked. Their legal team filed a motion to dismiss their own counterclaim without prejudice, clearly trying to cut the rot before it spread deeper. The judge denied the motion. Too late. The investigation turned up a string of shady land grabs Karen had engineered during her previous job as a developer in Arizona, records that showed mysterious boundary disputes resolved in her favor thanks to last-minute maps and suddenly vanished survey markers. Most of those were settlements no one ever challenged, until now. When the court ordered all construction halted, the building crews at Stonebrush vanished overnight. Half-completed sidewalks sat abandoned, pallets of stone left to weather in the mountain wind. The once busy pool site turned quiet. You could hear birdsong again along the ridge. No chainsaws, no cement mixers. Just silence. That Sunday, I walked the boundary line alone with my dog Scout. I reached the cluster of new homes where units 12 and 13 still stood. Empty. Silent. My GPS confirmed it again. Both homes planted right over my land. I placed fresh orange stakes at the real line, one every 10 feet, just in case anyone forgot where reality began. But the air felt off. Too quiet. Scout tensed up near the transformer box at the edge of the forest. He growled low, ears pinned back. I stepped closer, and my boots cracked over fresh tire tracks. Too fresh. Someone had been here last night. I didn't say anything out loud, but I took pictures, tagged the coordinates, and tightened the security camera coverage when I got back. I had a bad feeling, and it was only going to get worse. 3 nights later, just past 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of absolute nothing. That's what struck me first. No hum from the security panels, no flickering standby light on the router, no electric buzz from the old fridge in the guest kitchen. Just silence. Dead, absolute silence. I sat up, grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, and flicked it on. Nothing. Batteries were fresh. I checked them just the day before. I stumbled to the front window, peeked outside. The yard was pitch black. Even the motion lights on the barn were out. Someone had cut my power, and judging by the dead phone line and disabled internet backup, they'd hit my comms too. Scout was already growling in the hallway, tail rigid, nose low. I grabbed the emergency backup lantern from the closet and headed for the breaker shed. The door was hanging open. The main switch had been physically pulled, the lock plate twisted like it had been wrenched off with bolt cutters. The fiber line had been sliced straight through and stuffed into the soil. Not torn. Cut. Clean. Fast. Deliberate. That morning, the mailbox held something even worse. A half-folded piece of yellow paper. No return address. No signature. Just 4 words in crooked Sharpie strokes. 7 days. Your move. Beneath it, taped to the inside of the box, was a small photograph, taken with a telephoto lens. It showed me and Dana in my living room, back when we were reviewing the forged survey. From outside the house, through the window, whoever left the note had been watching me, closely. I didn't waste a second. By noon, the ranch was outfitted with a new security layer, 6 covert trail cams hidden across the woods and ridge lines, motion activated and remotely synced. I brought in my friend Marcus, a retired ranger with a private license now, to set up tactical monitoring. I also contacted a private security firm out of Pueblo I'd used during fire season once. They weren't cheap, but they were fast. And armed. Dana filed a police report, but given how non-violent the damage was, the county sheriff's office didn't exactly spring into action. They logged it, told me to keep an eye out, and politely hinted that I shouldn't escalate. I didn't tell them that I already had. 3 days passed quietly. Then, the 4th night, just after 1 a.m., I got an alert on the secure feed. Camera 3, southern tree line near the utility shed. Movement. I pulled the feed up on my laptop and froze. A man in HOA uniform, stonebrush jacket, HOA ID lanyard, even the smug logo cap, was crouching at the edge of the transformer box, fiddling with a toolkit. I activated the security floodlights remotely. He bolted like a scared raccoon, tripping over the gravel path. Marcus was already in motion, caught him just past the fence line, tasered him in the leg, and dragged him back up the hill like it was routine. We zip-tied him to the porch post and called the sheriff. This time, they had no choice. Turned out the guy's name was Brendan Shaw, 29, listed as an HOA maintenance technician. On his person, a small pack of industrial black powder, basic wiring gear, a delayed ignition module, and a fuse system. The sheriff didn't call it what it was, but I did. He was trying to blow the transformer. During interrogation, Brendan cracked fast. Said Karen gave him instructions, told him to send a message. Said she told him, they need to learn that this land will never be theirs. Claimed she even said that I'd back down once I lost a few nights of sleep. Well, I'd lost those already. We handed the footage, audio, and signed statement to the FBI office in Denver. They took over from there. Domestic sabotage of utility infrastructure, that's not a civil case. That's federal. Karen, for her part, did the only thing she could. Denied everything. Claimed Brendan was a lone wolf. An unstable contractor, claimed she'd never met him personally, even though we had video of her calling him by name on HOA property last month. The HOA board went into full damage control mode, lawyers, PR statements, blame shifting, but it didn't matter. The moment that footage aired, first on the local news, then syndicated across 3 states, Karen's image as the polished suburban mogul shattered like a windshield under a brick. By the end of the week, 2 other HOA employees quietly resigned, and the HOA's legal team filed an emergency petition to negotiate a settlement. I didn't respond, because this wasn't about money anymore. This was war. The morning after Brendan's arrest, I sat with a fresh cup of coffee on the porch, watching the frost cling to the pine fence. My inbox had exploded. Journalists, lawyers, online sleuths, even a podcaster who wanted to do a 3-part series on the HOA war in the Rockies. I ignored them all. The only messages I cared about were from the FBI agent assigned to the case, and my land attorney, Miles Kerrigan, who was loving every second of this disaster. Miles told me the FBI had already subpoenaed HOA financials and internal communication. They were investigating Karen for conspiracy, obstruction, and tampering with federal utility lines. Meanwhile, I had my own plan to finish carving this nonsense into stone. I filed a civil injunction demanding immediate removal of all 4 structures built on my land. I attached a detailed package, drone footage, survey overlays, original zoning maps, witness statements from construction workers, and a video interview with one of Karen's former subcontractors. That last one was gold. He admitted on camera that he was instructed to move boundary stakes 4 feet inward during Phase 1 grading. Said Karen told them, quote, "Nobody's gonna check. It's just trees." I filed everything in the El Paso County Court, and by then, the media had caught wind. I didn't go public myself, but someone leaked the court documents. News vans started parking outside the ranch like it was Yellowstone. Karen tried to spin it. She held a press conference on the HOA clubhouse lawn, where ironically 2/3 of the stage sat on my soil. Wearing her signature blue blazer, she called me a belligerent ex-military squatter, claimed I'd weaponized misinformation, and waved around a stack of old plats from the early 2000s. Same damn maps we'd already disproven. But her problem wasn't me. It was the evidence. That week, the court appointed a third-party cadastral specialist, neutral, certified, and from out of state, to settle the boundaries once and for all. His name was Luis Contreras, and he had the personality of a fax machine, but he did the job with terrifying precision. Over 5 days, he redid the entire perimeter survey using LiDAR scans, GPS triangulation, and core sampling on disputed terrain. On day 6, he submitted his report to the court and copied me. I opened the PDF, and there it was in bold. The entirety of the structures in question, Clubhouse Lot A, Residential Units 3 and 5, and Utility Line S3, are positioned between 1.1 and 1.4 acres inside Parcel 144A, North Cross Edge Ranch, recorded deed. 1986 Air 752. Encroachments confirmed. HOA documentation found to contain forged annotations, inconsistencies in date formatting, and use of a non-active notary ID belonging to deceased notary D. Hanley, expired 2015. Deceased notary. Karen had actually signed off the forged documents using a ghost. The judge didn't even wait for oral arguments. Within 48 hours, he issued a full injunction halting all development on the disputed land. Demolition orders were triggered pending final ruling. Karen's countersuit was thrown out. The courtroom buzzed like a beehive. But Karen, she didn't show. Instead, her legal team filed a motion to delay hearings due to medical stress. Meanwhile, HOA board members began to quietly disappear. Some resigned. Others stopped responding to subpoenas. Brendan, the would-be saboteur, flipped entirely. His plea bargain included full cooperation, and he sang like a canary. Then came the final blow. A junior clerk from the county recorder's office emailed my lawyer. Apparently, someone tried to manually amend the GIS coordinates for my lot in the official system using administrator credentials tied to a flagged terminal. The clerk was suspicious and pulled the terminal log. Guess who was caught on the internal CCTV? Karen. She'd entered the office under a guest badge using her maiden name, K. Bowers, and attempted to submit a correction form with a forged timestamp and updated parcel boundaries. It was all on video. Her ID, her handwriting, her bribe attempt, awkward and laughable, caught on mic. Look, I can get you 10 grand right now. Just clean up the lines a little. Within a day, she was in custody. Fraud, document forgery, bribery of a public official, and tampering with land records. And suddenly, no one in the HOA had anything to say. Not to me, not to the press, not even to their own residents. The court date for the final ruling was set. My lawyers prepped. I walked the property again, along the old oak line, past the clubhouse that never should have existed, past the homes that would soon be leveled. I stopped at the southern tree line and stared at the utility marker near the transformer Brendan tried to rig. And I wondered how many other people out there were fighting wars they never asked for just because someone in a blazer decided that paper power meant more than property. The week before, the final court hearing felt like the deep breath before a storm. The injunction was in effect, the HOA board was in shambles, and Karen was being held without bail, awaiting arraignment on a litany of felony charges. But even with her behind bars, the damage wasn't done echoing. I doubled my security presence around the ranch. Motion cameras, infrared trip sensors, a new gate system, and a rotating team from a private security firm made up mostly of retired law enforcement. My insurance agent was thrilled. I wasn't taking any more chances, not after what Brendan tried. Still, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. It started with a subtle drop in water pressure at the guest house, then brown sediment in the pipes. I assumed it was just winter sludge, but when the main line failed entirely 2 days later, my contractor opened the ground and found the cause. Someone had deliberately smashed the feeder pipe, rerouted the water with a garden hose, and buried it under fake gravel. It wasn't just sabotage, it was a message. We pulled surveillance footage, 2 silhouettes in Stonebrush HOA maintenance uniforms, night footage grainy, but we caught one clear enough to ID, a mid-level HOA board member named Mitch Cramner, the same guy who'd signed the HOA's trespass notice back in part 1 of this circus. I sent the footage to both my lawyer and the local sheriff. The sheriff, already fed up with this entire debacle, personally drove to Mitch's house, knocked on the door, and dragged him in for questioning. The man cracked within 2 hours. Mitch confessed that after Karen's arrest, a few board members decided to salvage leverage by making life as difficult as possible for me, destroying infrastructure, faking reports of code violations, even drafting a new emergency access ordinance that would have tried to keep me off part of my own land for community fire safety. Apparently, Karen had pre-written a list of sabotage tactics in case she went down. The document was found during a warrant search of her home, along with 2 burner phones and a printed Google satellite image of my ranch with red markings across the boundaries. It was cartoon villainy. I couldn't believe this was real life. But what really pushed it over the edge was the community meeting. HOA members, actual residents of Stonebrush Vista, many of whom had spent upwards of $1 million on their homes, held an emergency gathering in the clubhouse, still perched illegally on my soil, mind you. They demanded answers. Some demanded refunds. Others wanted blood. The acting president, a nervous man named Blake Yeager, stood up and tried to explain away the chaos as a misunderstanding with the county. But by then, the Contreras report had been published in the court's public portal. Residents had seen the maps. They knew exactly where their living rooms were and weren't supposed to be. That night, I got a call from a woman named Diane, one of the Stonebrush homeowners. She apologized, said she didn't know what the HOA had been doing, and offered to testify on my behalf. She wasn't alone. Within 48 hours, I had 7 new statements from residents, contractors, and even a delivery driver who'd been told by Karen to park inside the tree line and never mention it. My lawyer compiled the whole mess: sabotage, confessions, boundary violations, the ghost notary, the bribe attempt, and now internal whistleblowers into one final exhibit packet for the court. He titled it, North Cross Edge vs. Stonebrush Vista HOA, Pattern of Escalating Malfeasance. We brought it with us to court the following Monday. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, HOA members, residents, camera crews. I wore my best boots and a clean blue shirt. My lawyer looked like he was headed to a prize fight. Karen appeared in a beige jumpsuit and shackles. She didn't look at me. The judge, a stoic man named Horner, took his seat and began reading from the case file. No jury. This was a bench trial for the civil side, with criminal charges pending separately, and Judge Horner didn't waste time. He laid out the findings in a slow, methodical voice, like a man listing off sins at the gates of hell. Land encroachment confirmed, forged cadastral maps, fraudulent notary stamp, unauthorized development, utility sabotage, tampering with land registry records, multiple witness testimonies, attempts to bribe a county official. When he paused, the room was silent. Then he turned toward Karen and her remaining legal team. I find in favor of the plaintiff, he said, tapping the folder once. And I will be recommending criminal prosecution on all discovered offenses. The relief hit me so hard I had to sit down, but Horner wasn't done. He ordered Stonebrush Vista HOA to demolish the 4 encroaching structures within 90 days, restore the damaged woodland area at their expense, and pay a total of $3.7 million in damages for illegal occupation, environmental, destruction, legal costs, private security, and emotional distress. Karen's criminal trial would be scheduled separately, and from the look in her eyes as deputies led her out in cuffs, she knew damn well she'd be spending a long time away from pine trees and swimming pools. 3 weeks after the verdict, demolition crews arrived at dawn. I stood by the fence line with a thermos of coffee, watching as excavators rolled onto what used to be my southern forest and was now a former clubhouse site. They started with the pool cabana. Glass shattered, tiles cracked, rebar bent like wet twigs. Next came the 2 homes, vacant, hastily abandoned by their owners once the court confirmed they'd been built on stolen soil. The final target was the gas line hub. It took 2 full days to extract it safely, under watch from the fire department and a team from the State Utilities Commission. The land was scarred, but mine again. Stonebrush Vista HOA filed for bankruptcy the following month. The civil judgment had gutted them. Homeowners scrambled to restructure as an independent neighborhood association, but the damage was done. Most just wanted to move. Some sued Karen. A few even sent me thank you letters. Karen was convicted on all charges: document fraud, attempted bribery, criminal conspiracy, and ordering acts of sabotage. She got 14 years without parole. The sentencing barely made the news. I bought the adjacent 5-acre parcel at the county auction. The clubhouse rubble was gone, and I cleared the space for pasture. Just before winter, I installed a new wooden fence and added 12 signs along the perimeter. Private land. Not HOA property. Trespassers will be photographed, reported, and mocked. Then I sat on my porch, opened a beer, and watched the sun set over a property no one would steal again.